Wisdom, the final frontier to true knowledge. Welcome to Wisdom Trek, where our mission is to create a legacy of wisdom, to seek out discernment and insights, to boldly grow where few have chosen to grow before. Hello, my friend. I am Guthrie Chamberlain, your captain on our journey to increase wisdom and create a living legacy. Thank you for joining us today as we explore wisdom on our second millennium of podcast. This is day 1341 of our trek, and it is Worldview Wednesday. Creating a biblical worldview is essential to have a proper perspective on today's current events. To establish a biblical worldview, you must have a proper understanding of God and His Word. Our focus for these next several months on Worldview Wednesday is mastering the Bible through a series of brief insights. These insights are extracted from a book by the same title from one of today's most prominent Hebrew scholars, Dr. Micheal S. Heiser. This book is a collection of insights designed to help you to understand the Bible better. When we let the Bible be what it is, we can understand it as the original readers did and as the original writers intended. Each week we'll explore two additional insights. Our focus today will be Mastering the Bible. Most prophecy is already fulfilled. And insight number 45 is Old Testament prophets preached at different times and places. Since the book of the prophets are grouped together in our English Bibles, it appears to most readers that the prophets lived or ministered at roughly the same time, but that just is not the case. The biblical prophets are divided into two categories. First, there are those prophets who didn't write any of the books of the Old Testament. Some famous prophets like Elijah and Elisha are in this category. They didn't write any of the books as far as we know. Then there are the writing prophets, those who left us with material in the Old Testament. The writing prophets are typically categorized into the major prophets, the name given to lengthy books like Isaiah, Jeremiah, and Ezekiel, and the minor prophets, short books like Micah, Habakkuk, and Obadiah. Regardless of the organizational groupings into which the prophets might fall, they lived over a span of hundreds of years, and they also ministered in various parts of the Promised Land. Most prophetic books contain enough information to situate the prophet chronologically. For example, prophets like Elijah and Elisha lived in the 10th or 9th centuries BC. We know that because their ministries overlapped with King Ahab. Isaiah lived in the second half of the 8th century BC, since his life intersected with kings Uzziah, Jotham, Ahaz, and Hezekiah. Prophets like Jeremiah, who are mentioned at the end of the line of the kings of Judah, can be safely situated just before the fall of Judah to Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon, and that would be around 586 BC. If a prophet lived prior to 722 BC, the date of the fall of the 10-tribe northern kingdom of Israel, they would have ministered to either Israel or Judah. Solving this question depends in part on whether the kings of the north or the south are mentioned in the written material. It can also be resolved by mention of the hostile foreign empire like Assyria, which was the northern kingdom's enemy, or Babylon, the southern kingdom's enemy, or by their means of focus on Israel/Samaria or on Judah. For example, Ezekiel's prophecies opened at the river Chaban in Babylon, allowing us to know that he was among the captives taken from Judah. Hosea's book begins with the list of the same kings who reigned during Isaiah's lifetime, which were Uzziah, Jotham, Ahaz, and Hezekiah. Hosea ministered to the apostate northern kingdom since he mentions the threat of Assyria in Hosea chapter 8, verses 8 and 9, and focuses on the northern kingdoms of Israel. Isaiah, on the other hand, focuses on Judah and its environment. Knowing the time and place of the prophets is vital for interpreting in context. But even when certainty isn't possible, the message of loyalty to God is always evident. So let's now move on to insight number 46. Most of the material in the prophets has already been fulfilled. One of the things Dr. Heiser specifies that he notices with great regularity during his teaching career is the overwhelming propensity of the Bible readers to assume much of what was written in the Old Testament prophets is speaking to a time yet future to us. Over and over again, whether in class discussion or in their written work, students would take phrases like the return of Israel or the restoration of the temple worship as speaking about end times in relation to their own lives. The opposite, in fact, is the case. A couple of passages will illustrate this problem. Let's first look at Isaiah chapter 10, verses 20 and 21. In that day, the remnant left in Israel, the survivors of the house of Jacob, will no longer depend on allies who seek to destroy them, but they will faithfully trust in the Lord, the Holy One of Israel. A remnant will return. Yes, a remnant of Jacob will return to the mighty God. The second passage we'll look at today is Isaiah chapter 37, verses 31 and 32. And you who are left in Judah, who have escaped the ravages of the siege, will put down roots in your own soils and grow up and flourish. For a remnant of my people will spread out from Jerusalem, a group of survivors from Mount Zion. The passionate commitment of the Lord of Heaven's armies will make this happen. Many of the students would presume the return and the remnant spoken of here refers to a future regathering of Israel before or in conjunction with the return of Jesus. But that type of reading rips the passage from their context. Isaiah saw the northern kingdom go into captivity and prophesied that the southern kingdom would suffer the same fate. The first passage could, therefore, speak of the hope of the return of the northern tribes, something Ezekiel later explicitly prophesied in Ezekiel chapter 37. The remnant language most clearly refers to the people who would be taken into Babylon much later, since Jeremiah and Ezekiel use the same term of the people captured by Babylon. Both prophets feared that the remnant would not be allowed to return to the land when the captivity was over if they did not repent. And references for that can be found in Jeremiah 42 and 44 and Ezekiel chapter 11. We know from Old Testament history that the remnant of Israel did return from captivity. Consequently, it makes much more sense, unless something in the passage makes it impossible, to interpret the return and remnant language in the prophets to be speaking of the exile and return, events that have already come to pass. There are similar problems with the day of the Lord, the phrase that should not be assumed to be speaking of the end times. It sometimes does, but context must dictate the conclusion. The same is true of language in the prophets about the Israelite return. In every case, the context must dictate the meaning of the text, not modern preaching or our interest in prophecy. The context must drive the conclusion that the prophetic statements refer to a time far removed from biblical days. Otherwise, we force biblical passages to say things that are simply not accurate. We must be cautious when we try to force prophecy into our preconceived notion or mindset of the end times. Context is the primary determining factor. That will conclude this week's lesson on another 2 insights from Dr. Heiser's book, Mastering the Bible. Next Worldview Wednesday, we will continue with 2 additional insights. I believe that you'll find each Worldview Wednesday an interesting topic to consider as we build our biblical worldview. Tomorrow we will continue with our 3-minute humor nugget that will provide you with a bit of cheer, which will help you to lighten up and live a rich and satisfying life. So encourage your friends and family to join us, and then come along with us tomorrow for another day of Wisdom Trek, Creating a Legacy. If you'd like to listen to any of the past 1,340 treks or read the Wisdom Journals, they are all available at wisdom-trek.com. And I encourage you to subscribe to Wisdom Trek on your favorite podcast player so that each day will be downloaded to you automatically. And thank you so much for allowing me to be your guide, your mentor, but most importantly, I am your friend as I serve you through the Wisdom Trek podcast and journal each day. And as we take this trek of life together, let us always live abundantly, love unconditionally, listen intentionally, learn continuously, lend to others generously, lead with integrity, and then leave a living legacy each day. I am Guthrie Chamberlain, reminding you to keep moving forward. Enjoy your journey, and then create a great day every day. See you tomorrow.